What's up guys, Bo here again. Impromptu light source. Alright, in this entry I wanted to give a relatively short message to you. In case you're someone who, primarily the people I want to try and reach predominantly are the people who are out there in the world who are trying to do something, right, with their lives, who don't necessarily fit in with the standard path of doing things. But as I covered in many previous entries I've done, that path to freedom is can be quite a harsh one in terms of, it's a rocky road to get to a place where you own yourself and you're at peace with what goes on in your life, right? And it's very easy to be demoralized and just be overwhelmed by, whatever comes up in life. This could be, a potential kind of artifact of certain personality type that I happen to possess. But in any case, I thought that I would just give my own thoughts on what you should do in a situation where you need to keep going in life, right? And, the whole world is telling you to, in essence, not quit necessarily, but the world never tells you to quit explicitly, right? It always does so in the most subtle, insidious way, Like it begins with slowly wearing down your enthusiasm, your drive, your passion, your love, until before you know it, you're back in what's the fucking point, right? Maybe the other people were right? And going on from this, it's very easy for us, and I'm going to do some entries about this. I had an idea to do some entries based around, because recently, as you know, I've been doing entries where I kind of delve into allowing, right? In my own exploration, so thus far, I've been kind of really trying my best to basically honor my own rhythm in life, right? As I said, a key to designing a life circumstance that is satisfactory involves you basically necessarily unplugging yourself from certain, let's say, obligations and duties that go against your internal rhythm, your natural rhythm of doing things, right? And so, and how you do that is that you have to consult your feelings, right? You have to tap into your sensitivity. But what this entails, so tapping into sensitivity, like I said, is a two-pronged thing, right? It's like there's two sides to it, right? You go in the direction of your joy, and then you have to also go into your pain and understand it, right? But and this is very important because, as I outlined in the entries where I talked about it, the reason why many of us cannot find peace, cannot find love, even though we are so obsessed with finding happiness, right? Because, obviously the message that I want to give personally, and that I personally want to, feature in my own life, espouse in my own life, is positivity, is hope, is love, and all of that stuff, right? But the reason why we're still unhappy, despite, this kind of, every single person can say that they want love and happiness and peace and all of that stuff, but the reason why a lot of the times the exact opposite is true is because we are so deathly afraid of the second part of tapping into sensitivity, which is going in the direction of your pain, right? It's a bit weird, right? Again, I'm going to go deeper into this when I do an entry that's going to be along the lines of, so pain and fear and negativity are our kind of like idols of deity. Like they're kind of are gods, and yet they're gods with which we cannot connect, right? We're so deathly afraid of them. But in any case, kind of going on from what I was saying, you have to do this if you want to be free in life. And initially, this is overly aggressive. So again, I explained how, particularly if you're on a spiritual journey, like myself, or any way you want to articulate that, personal journey, personal growth, self-actualization, we begin by kind of having an abstract idea of where we want to get to, who we want to be, what changes we would like to make to ourselves and to our lives. And so we start off with a very kind of overly aggressive kind of approach to doing this, right? We recognize that, yes, fear is always going to be there. And for me to resist it so deeply, it warrants a bit of exploration. It warrants a bit of, awareness, going forwards, right? But, we do so in such an overcompensating way where, we deliberately put ourselves, this is probably very familiar if if you're on a spiritual journey, or if if you're familiar with like these new agey kind of circles and the kind of attitudes that kind of pervade them. But we think that because in order to accept our fear, we have to throw ourselves into it, right? To tap into our anger, we need to throw ourselves into our anger. And yes, that could help, but at the same time, there comes a point where we have to kind of balance ourselves, right? Because when we try to throw ourselves, into this, for example, right? You want to be brave. No one, again, everyone is fixated on this idea of fear and the world is a dangerous place. But it's in a way that, I need to protect myself as much as I can against this, right? So what might I do? I might throw myself deliberately into dangerous situations. I might deliberately stoke conflict amongst, between myself and other people. I might deliberately be an asshole to people, or whatever it is, right? Whatever it is whatever that kind of rebellious action towards your fears and weaknesses you launch yourself into. And by doing this, we throw ourselves off balance, right? We lose our grounding, right? And grounding is, I made a video about this, which is basically, it's another word for what I'm describing, which is finding your own rhythm and finding peace within yourself, right? Because peace, first and foremost, is not stillness, in the sense that it isn't nothingness, right? Peace is not devoid of passion, of desire. It's not devoid of fear and pain, right? Fear and pain, passion and love, whatever you want to call it, joy, those ups and downs of life are a feature of this existence, right? And so, no matter how, you could go and live in a monastery, in the Tibetan mountains and become Buddhist. You could go into the army and dedicate your life to violent defense for your nation or whatever it is. But regardless of what you do, the ups and downs are always going to be there, right? And so really in this entry, I'm kind of beating around the bush a bit, because I'm just making sure that all of my concepts gel, in a way I'm kind of thinking through myself. But the point of this entry that I wanted to give is that yes, there are monsters out there in the world, right? The world is a painful place, right? I did another entry where I talked about the life as a fight. There's a brutal aspect to life, right? And we must accept that to the degree that we aren't resisting it so badly that it's not making our minute by minute by minute existence are living hell because we're so fucking scared of the fucking monsters in the world. You know, death, illness, terrorism, you know, whatever you, like, you know, the earth's, like, you know, inevitable destruction, whatever it is. That kind of, that kind of like miasma of fear that we hold on to, you know, will continue to be there regardless of, you know, well, like, will continue to be there and haunt us to the, you know, to the extent that to which we continue to resist it, right? And so an important aspect of, you know, starting to connect with life in such a way that you're not always running away from life, is you must tap into your pain. You have to do that second component of tapping into sensitivity. But once you've done that, right, you must recognize when you are being overly aggressive with it, right? So part of this kind of ongoing personal development journey that we all go through is to find balance in our lives, right? It is to find the place from which we can connect with life, you know. You could say this, like, you know, some spiritual teachers call this the present moment, you know, presence, like Eckhart Tolle, which basically, and ultimately that means that we must connect with life, we must face our fears, but we must also find balance in there, right? Because life is ups and downs. It's not just ups. Like, you cannot make a life that is just up. You cannot, and life is not just downs, right? When you tap into your darkness, you know, when you explore the fears that you have, with the intention of you know, understanding them and finding some way to, in a way, transcend them, you know, because ultimately that's what we're trying to do. We look into our fears, you know, but at the same time, life is also about moving on, right? Because the tendency with, you know, getting into you know, darkness and fear and all of that, right? And this happens naturally to us when we grow older, right? The more hardship that we have to burden, the more in a way that we harden, right? The more and more we see, you know, we see more and more examples of why life is a scary place, and thus we do more, we exert more effort to try to protect ourselves against that, right? But at the same time, you know, life is beautiful, right? And what I'm trying to explain is that, yes, you know, there are monsters outside of the house. There will always be monsters outside of the house, under the bed, right? I'm using like a child analogy here, but that doesn't mean that that the sun doesn't shine, you know? You could lose someone dear to you, and that's painful, and you know, it's something that happens, and you sit with it. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that the flowers will not still be beautiful and smell like, you know, really nice, right? And to lose, you know, they will always retain their scent, you know? You could become 90 years old, you know, decrepit, you know, lacking in the energy that you once had, completely a shell of who you once were as the youthful you, right? But you can still go outside and enjoy the butterflies as they flutter through the air. You can still pick up your N64, you know, and play, you know, your old games and feel that wonderful sense of nostalgia, right? You know, life is the fight. Life is full of pain and suffering and loss. You know, we will ultimately die. You know, some of us will ultimately contract illness. Some of us will ultimately lose a limb. Some of us will ultimately lose a part of ourselves in someone else, in, you know, something else, like in a part of us that we fostered throughout our adult life and then lose at one point, you know, like a career, like a skill set, right? Yes, life is scary. We don't know what will happen to the human race eventually, and we cannot ignore these things. right? We cannot push these things away ultimately and wish and pretend that they never happened, because they do happen, right? There is violence in the world, there is terrorism in the world. All of those things are real, but does it mean right now that you have to worry? Does it mean right now that you have to throw everything that you love, that brings you joy, away, just so that you can protect yourself against the darkness? Just so that you don't have appeared scared by the shadows, you know? Yes, there are monsters outside the house. If you open the door, one of them might come in and fuck your house up. You step outside, you might get mauled by one. Right, and this is all metaphorical, right? I'm not talking about real monsters, obviously, outside your house. I'm talking about the metaphorical monsters that exist in our lives when we step away from our homes, our comfort zones, right? That which we love. But does their presence mean that we have to be stuck in a mental maze of fear? Does it mean that we can't pick up the things that we once thought were lovely and nourishing to us? You know, do we have to now think them naive and childish just because there are monsters outside, right? Do you have to let go of your childhood passions like video games or like make-believe and imagination just because, oh, the world happens to be a scarier place than you thought? No, right? Do you have to give up your love, your sensitivity, just because the world is a scary place? No, right? It's a rhetorical question, but it's like, and this is, you know, this has been what I've been discovering, because I've been trying myself personally to reconcile, you know, my fear of the world. The world is a fucking scary place. The more that you find new perspectives, like I talk about, you know, expanding your perspective, you realize that the world is a scary place. You know, there is violence and horrors that go on without you even realizing it, you know, and like you can connect to that. And you can accept it because it is all part of life. And, you know, that is what we're here to do as people who, you know, wish to tap into our sensitivity and live lives of ownership and peace, right? And transcendence. But at the same time, I can still play video games. I can still walk in the park. I can still sing. I can still play the piano. I can still dance. I can still act like a fool. I can still do all of those things because those also exist, right? So my message to you, I need to round this up because I need to go, but my message to you in this video is don't ignore the horrors of the world. They're there. Don't try and run away from them. But at the same time, you don't need to worry about them to the extent that you lose everything that is beautiful in your existence, in your perception. You know, don't ignore the roses just because there are weeds or, you know, whatever horrors there are, like beyond the fence. The daisies are still there for you to smell and to appreciate, right? So cool. I hope you get what I'm trying to say here. It is that, yes, in your times of desperation and worry, it's really tempting to just be like, fuck, the world's fucked. You know what? I need to learn to fight and protect myself. You can do that, you know? Like, I plan to do that one day, you know? Because, like, the world is a scary place, you know? You do need to protect ourselves. And you realize this the older you get. But at the same time, don't lose the beauty. Don't let go of the beauty just because the world can be ugly. Don't do that. Don't make that mistake. Follow your joy regardless. You know? Do what you love. Be innocent. You know? Grow younger in your age. So cool. Hope that was a help, like that was, you know, got you thinking and helped you if you might happen to be in the same kind of place as I am, you know, just trying to make something of my life, to accept everything, but at the same time not be held down by my fear, you know? Yes, it just, I can keep stressing this, but like, the world is a scary place, but it doesn't mean that right now you have to be scared, right? So cool, this has been my entry, I hope you enjoyed it, and as always, I will catch you guys in the next entry. Peace out, bros and sisters. Bye!